for this episode of The Onion and whatnot for Uplift Protocol, there's something that I do enjoy with writing the little opening quotes is sometimes with the Sleeping in Starlight memoir portion, you'll get little hints on how certain things will either play out or like little tidbits of like history or little anecdotes that will explain certain things or at least, hint at certain things. I do enjoy doing that because that way it lets me like sprinkle a little bit of some of the exposition around and a little bit of the world building. I mean, I know a lot of people might not, they'll glance over the quotes and then keep going because they want to get to like the meat of the story. But yeah, that's like my little way of, if you want a little bit of hints, pay attention to the memoir portions. Because unless stated otherwise for that part, it's Eliza talking about things as she's recalling them, and that Eliza is the one from, the end of the series, basically, to give a little bit more of a hint right there. Um, the whole time travel mechanic, again, I took a page from Babylon 5 in the terms of, like, it's a closed loop, like a closed circuit. But at different stages, I make notes like, okay, when Eliza takes over in this section for like her future self to her past self, it's because of X, Y, or Z, and this is along that part of the timeline. There's only going to be a handful of incidents of this, to make it easier to keep track of. But as an example, when the Earthstone initially tethered itself to Eliza way back in Book 0, the other Eliza, Odessin, did a little bit of obfuscation, kind of like took a little over for primary Eliza to kind of put, her parents at ease, or at least that version of her parents. And it was something that the Earthstone requested of that particular Eliza because Eliza Odessin is a Weave speaker and has a little bit more of an inkling of what's going on. Not that she has the whole picture, but, she had enough to where it's like, okay, so the Earthstone wants me to pretend. And again, all this was explained in the Avalon issue, at least a bit later. But then you also have the 42nd century people, which honestly, the 42nd century parts with the one little traveler I got there that's giving her letters from herself, that's a mix of like the Legion stuff from DC's, the Legion of Superheroes, where it's like the future wants to make sure it happens, and the Weave wants to make sure that future happens, so it allows certain kinds of shenanigans. There are ways that Unity can try to piggyback on that, but it's kind of like a lot of that stuff, honestly, it will be showcased in the final book. Because with the final book, you'll have part of it taking place in current time, where the big finale has kind of happened, where stippity steppity, there goes the Unity Dragon, kind of thing. But I figured, with the big bad, whoever's facing it, they'll see different things based on who that person is. So that's the reason why, Liza's kind of getting put to the side in terms of overall information, because the less she knows in terms of something very vital, the less Unity has to kind of torture her with, because again, that the final book is going to be pretty oof, at least to me. Hopefully other people will see it that way too, because it's all really building up to that final part. Every little thing that I put in here, I'm trying to showcase to, like, how is this going to balance out at the end, and give people diabetes. So much diabetes, it's fine. This is fine. But yeah, it's a part of book 12. It'll take place with Eliza's friends and family, and like what's happening after, taking down the ultimate evil, versus what's happening with Eliza as she makes that final stab. Um, Part of it will showcase from future Eliza's point of view of like, oh, so that's how that time traveling shenanigans really sets up. Because even with the Babylon Squared episode, with Sinclair moving around with Zathras and the future version of himself moving around, you'll get a lot more context for that in the later season, because it shows it from the flip side. Well, that's kind of like what I want to do with the last book, Sleeping in Starlight. It's like you get to see stuff from the flip side of that. So even if it doesn't make as much sense now, once you have the context for it, because you'll see it from that particular Eliza's point of view, you'll understand a whole lot more. It's like little things with the onion, little things, And the biggest thing is I'm having fun with it. That's all that's really needed. Just have fun with what you write. Plus, I hope to make a dent into kid characters being just fine. It's just that it's the frequency of which you use them. Like, if the actual story is more focused on the older characters, then yeah, like have the kid characters pop up when they're needed. Like in the case of the Murphy triplets, well, they're there to help a particular plot point in season 2 where they have to help free a trapped colony of Typherian weeb speakers and light shamans, and they were purposely cut off from the overall Typherian sector and everything else because their former king there basically knew what was going to happen. So, and to get around the whole idea of like, well, you can't really, like, let's see, cart around set of babies everywhere. So I made it to where they would grow up just enough to where they'd start getting used to a little bit of their power, but they're not going to be a main focus in terms of, overall big character arc or anything. Not that they're not unimportant, it's just that for every kind of, setup I plant in this series, I'd like to have a way to solve a particular problem. So that way everything kind of like balances out. Even the bad guys will have like kind of like this lock and key set up too, where it's like they try to do this, but here's the counterbalance, and then, well, if they lose in some sectors, they'll gain in others. Because it's going to be a back and forth in the series until the finale, because each side, the Weave is fighting an ideological war, but also wants to save, the souls of its creation, and kind of create a way to redeem more of those people if it can. And while on the other hand, Unity just wants to devour them all, and then the horror beyond Unity is just like, oh no, oh look at this, because again, the onion has layers, so you'll get to see how things come to fruition as I go along. Season 2 is going to have a heck of a lot more taking place on Typha itself, so you'll see a lot more from that angle. Not that I'm going to ignore Earth completely. It's just the focus will go over to there, kind of like how you saw a bit of different focuses depending on which civil war is happening. And in Babylon 5, because again, that's like one of the bigger, I would say the biggest influence on Uplift Protocol in terms of some themes and everything, and even some structures. But I'm adding my own 2 cents to it, where Uplift Protocol is a more brighter kind of cheery place, except if you have that, then you have to make sure the enemies are like the counterpoint to that brightness. They have to be even darker than normal, not in terms of like put all the sludge on screen like Game of Thrones type of setup, but no, their overall modus operandi has to be, well, this place is far too cheery for my liking. Again, more of a traditional good versus evil setup, which is what I've pretty much aimed for the beginning. And yes, eventually there will be more superhero shenanigans and everything else. You'll actually see a bit of that in the closing of season one. It's just that yeah, part of it was like establishing certain things in season one, and you get to see how certain stuff changes over time. And even rereading earlier chapters because I'm trying to pick out, like, okay, this is actually an artifact from a previous draft, and I just forgot that it was still in there. So that's why you'll see me go back eventually and change a few terms out, just to make it line up with the rest of the later issues. Because even though the core story is outlined, and like all the other later chapters have like a few lines to, like, hey, in this chapter these characters are involved in doing this, and then I put in a little note to how it ties into the main arc, and then what sub arcs might be going on. And even though that is pretty much set down, sometimes like little details might evolve or change over time, but it happens. That's the reason why it's always good to have at least a little bit of an outline. I don't fly off the seat of my pants with everything. Now, when it comes to adding more Bardaxians, like, yes, sometimes I get influenced where it's like, oh yes, more Bardaxians. This is never bad. More space dogs, more regular dogs, and eventually you'll just see how the Living Stone ties to certain characters. And what their overall origin is, because that'll pop up later. It might be more towards the end of season 2, maybe the beginning of season 3, where I'll bring more of that up. Because again, every season is building up to the overall capper, which at this point it looks like book 12 will probably be the longest book, because I'll be pretty much tying up all the loose ends that I can think of. So there you go. Have a good day, everybody.